Unfinished coordinates breathe. The voice of the pole that distorts light is a self-portrait of repulsion circling the void, touching neither the starting point nor the ending point, stepping outside even the concept. Reality chooses silence, and that silence is the closest to reality. The pole tames the impossible, and the sound of silence wavers outside the axis of coordinates. Whenever the wind, which cannot reach from beyond, caresses the outline before it is named, the pole perceives its own fragility. Perception turns inward, and the moment it touches the abyss, the pole, which remains non-existent, is transformed into a substitute for existence. All structure is inverted, and the perpendicularity of the starting point and the ending point collapses. Collapse is the only form that remains in place, and vulnerability is allowed the name polar point only by its non-existence. The pole without the shadow of a figure is never touched by anyone, never pointed to by anyone, but only tends to maybe inside the most distant silence. The pole that does not exist believes its own fragility to be a beautiful fallacy. Every horizon holds an end, but the fingertip that points to the end never touches it. The invisible trajectory that appears only at the moment the ice crystals freeze, and the footprints of those who travel in search of it always crumble back into the past. It is vulnerable because it is not marked by coordinates on a map. Every time we hope to reach it, it crumbles one step ahead of us. That is why people keep chasing after it. The pole which does not exist is like a crystal that melts into nothing the moment it is touched. Then the pole is an illusion. No, it just has a different face each time it is found. Each time we turn our eyes to it, it is given a different name, and it creates a fleeting afterimage that cannot be grasped forever. As long as we seek it, the pole will remain the pole. But the moment we touch it, it ceases to be a pole. Existence is a fragile excuse, a tentative voice that continues to speak for itself while touching nothingness. It is a place where the screams of existence settle at a single point. There is neither mass nor temperature, and it is found only by refusing to be seen. The phantom limbs of the unborn scratch the sky, a concept that dwells for a moment in the traces of their claws. But it cannot persist in its fragility, and in seeking to persist, it is defeated by reality. The event pole without trace is disintegrated even before it arises, a certainty that remains dismantled, a structure that is certain only that it does not exist. Polar points are never placed in this universe. By not being placed, there is an arrow that continues to pierce toward infinity. That arrow is the gesture of emptiness called knowing, and we can only remain here by being penetrated by emptiness, the point where we waver with nothingness as our axis. That is the pole of non-existence, a fragile, impossible point of origin that our world depends on without ever being able to reach it. Space and time are annihilated without intersecting, and the naming impulse seeps into the few unobservable seams that remain. However, the very concept of existence itself seeks its coordinates as a sacrificial point for excavating itself. The axis of contradiction rotates. Unable to support even its own contradiction, it is still a less than gravitational will that tries to avoid collapse. The pole is the totality of coordinates that are lacking, the memory of eyes that have given up seeing, the reverberation of palms that have given up touching, the silence of language that has given up speaking, the womb of disconnection where silence continues to call for silence. Existence does not exist for the sake of existence, but only finds a temporary dwelling in the gap to support non-existence. The pole always remains absent, and yet it pierces space-time as the basis of existence, bringing nothingness into view. There we stand. But it is a fiction. There is no foothold at the pole, which does not exist. The here where we stand is nothing more than an intermediately generated bubble, in which existence and non-existence disappear before touching each other. Whenever we try to give words to it, the bubble bursts and only the unspeakable continues to drift as a thin film. The infinite stillness and the infinite movement coexist at the same time, but they are eternally unexistent as traces that have never been encountered. It is impossible to grasp it. Faster than the skin can perceive it, the polar point collapses into the internal pressure of the fingertip, and the nerves cannot capture even a trace of it. In order to exist, our body holds an unreachable field inside itself. It is vulnerable because it cannot hold on for even a second. This body finally acquires the contours of I by being penetrated by something that is not me, and by being connected to somewhere that is not me.